Family, pardon me, let me recognize all the dignitaries here first. But allow me on behalf of my family to extend deepest sympathy to Comrade Sabra, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of Comrade Isahak Bashir. I believe from the very amount of people that we see here, we know, we recognize from all walks of life, is a clear reflection of the quality of man that lies here before us. It is a life that has been said deserve of celebration, but at the same time, it's a man, a human being, who established relationships with family and friends. And as much as we would like to continue celebrating, we cannot help to mourn this man, because we will see him no more. And because of that, we will all be poorer for the loss of Comrade Bashir. Comrade Bashir he came from not poor family relatively to the time of the Essequibo Coast. And therefore the path that his life took is testimony to the quality of man that he is. A man who became a champion for the poor. He did not start his political life, as Enrico said, in 1968. Well before that, way in the 50s. Yes. Janet Jagan was the member of parliament representing this area 1957 to 1961. And Comrade Bashir, Comrade Hari Prasad Doctor, who probably knows Comrade Bashir more than all of us, were her main people who assisted her tremendously in her work in this regard. And he really dedicated. He could have easily stayed with his farmer's estate, build it up, become stinking rich, but he didn't do that. He followed the ideals of seeing a better life for the people of this country. His life spanned a wide area. It was the period of colonialism, some of the darkest days. But it was also the period of the beginning of the enlightenment, the political enlightenment of the Guyanese people. And he captured those moments. From the very beginning, he was there with Comrade Cheddi Jagan. He was able to see in the 50s the beginning of the transformation of the Essequibo Coast from being Cinderella in rags to beginning to develop as Cinderella the Princess. He was present when the first electricity plant came on the Essequibo Coast in the 1960s to be opened. He was there in the Tapakuma project, where it was one of the major, together with Blackbush Boulder and MMA, to expand land development and to give land to the farmers of this country. He was at every turn. It was here he was important. He defended. Comrade Hari Prasad will tell you that in the 1960s, in the days of the general strike, when the whole staff at the Sully Hospital was off, Hari was in charge of keeping the hospital running. And because the volunteers that he organized could not, or in principle they took the position that they could not take money from the government to feed the volunteers because they were not staff. It was Comrade Isahak Bashir who organized the meals to feed the people at the Sully Hospital to ensure that service was the whatever minimal service we had at the time would have been continued to be provided for them. He was in every area, and he blooded some very important comrades for the people who rose up in this country. Comrade Rohi spoke about Ali Baksh, Chaubey, Hiral Mohan, some of Nazim, some of those comrades who have passed away, but there are many still alive. You have Samaru, you have Shaukat Ali, you have many others. He worked in the RPA and would have had something to do with the rambunctious Mr. Dharam Kumar Siraj. So he blooded a lot of comrades. And I myself have a lot of memories of him. We visited, he was the first one who took me to Moruca and made me drink Hubudi water. And many other episodes that we had along the way. And he was, as I said in a message that I put out, he was a highly educated man. Although he never went to university to study, his university was life. He was an extremely engaging man who could speak on any subject: international affairs, local politics, economics, and he educated himself. Apart from the fact that the PPP sent him abroad in the Soviet Union to study, he educated himself and dedicated himself so that he could have been a good PPP member in order to educate and take people along in the struggle. The man who lies before us was a selfless man. This generation of comrades were the comrades that kept this party alive in the immediate after we lost government in 1964. And while we rever the achievements of Comrade Chelli Jagan, it is on shoulders like these that he stood on to help to move our country forward. And he was a very engaging man with a lot of stories to tell and was ready to give his life. And he almost did so in the mid-1970s. When at high daytime, broad daylight, steam away, an adventure steadily in 1975, 76, armed with only a bundle of Soviet Weekly and Grandma in his hand. He was challenging a renegade PPP man, Ram Lagan, I think it was, who was still making anti-PPP propaganda. He was confronting him, only with newspapers in his hands, when they summoned the police and shot him more than once. I remember that very well, because one of the doctors who were at Esikimokos who did a lot to help save his life is also passed away, Dr. Mitchell. And I myself was at Georgetown Hospital when they managed Janet Jagan through the then Minister of Health. He was another doctor whose name I don't remember immediately, but a very kind gentleman in the PNC government at that time. They sat and they arranged to get him to fly him to Georgetown. And I was with Mrs. Jagan when he came to Georgetown to be looked after. And here I must pay tribute to Dr. Sharma, who is now, I think, representative of Ireland. He did the diplomatic service now, short man. He did a lot to help Comrade Bashir in that difficult period. So he was prepared to give his life for what he believed in, for the cause that he so dearly believed in, and from his belief that we can make a better country. That is the quality of man that is here before us today. On a personal level, all of us who had dealings with him will have our own memories of him. He was a sensitive man. He remembered people's kindness. And he remembered my parents, because when he was campaigning in Carriacou, it was at our house that he stayed. And when we were forced to migrate from Carriacou to settle on the West Demerara, where both my parents died on the West Demerara. But about 1 week before my mother died, he visited her. She told me when I went to see her that Comrade Bashir stopped in to see her, and he was singing hymns with her. Well, I know the comrades, I know his children, but they're his children, so they must say nice things about him. They said he could sing. I would say he knew a lot of songs, but I'm not so sure that he was such a great singer. And he was because she was very sensitive. And that was about a week before my mother passed, that he went to visit her, to sit with her, to talk with her. And many times, even the last time that I met him, when Hiralal Mohan had died, and we were talking here, he was reminding me of the days in Carriacou with Auntie Alice and the rest of people from the village.